Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city, at WFOY 1240 AM studios. Through the power of the Internet, this program is being streamed worldwide on 1240news.com. The show will also be archived on RyleAuctions.com, as they are the host of this program. Additionally, this show will be posted on YouTube.com. We're going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today to help us out. We've got some VIP call-in real estate and auction leaders who, again, will be calling in today. Number one, I always try to start out this program with success, and success means that H.R. 1734, which is a bill that was sponsored by Congressman Dennison, has been passed in the House. This bill is designed to sell off and reutilize properties that the government has that they are not using. I keep on talking about the post office in Washington, D.C. as a prime example. According to this article, let me read it to you. One property already drawing attention is the old post office annex in Washington, D.C. The facility loses $6 million a year, yet it hasn't been used in 10 years. Folks, that's $60 million worth of tax-paying dollars that we take care of. Congressman Dennison says Donald Trump and the Waldorf Astoria has expressed interest in buying the annex to use as a commercial venue that creates jobs and actually makes money for the taxpayers. We'll be talking about the need to sell government surplus property in this show. We'll also be talking about auctions, upcoming auctions, and I'm thrilled that you're here today and listening. The mission statement for this program is to provide educational experiences for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. Ryle Auctions, which is our sponsor, does a great deal of real estate auctions across the country. We're going to be hearing from them, and I'm thrilled to hear that. The other thing I want to talk about, if I get a chance, and we've got one real estate broker that's going to be calling in, is how auction companies work with real estate brokers very successfully. Good for the auctioneer, good for the broker, good for the seller, good for the buyer, and we'll be talking about ways that the broker can make money through auctions. Very important. If you're a real estate broker listening, you'll want to hear about that. The people who listen to this show are, number one, real estate brokers, auctioneers, the general public, real estate media, bankruptcy attorneys, government officials. These are the folks that not only call in on the show, but also listen, and I thank you. There's times when there's general public that will call in. Hold on, we've got a call right now. Good morning, you're on the air.
Thank you, sir. Doug, it's Jerry Day.
Jerry, well, thank you so much for calling. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm with Ryle Auctions, National Sales Manager, and what I do is try to get a good quality of information to our folks and to our sellers about what's happening in the marketplace and what they can reasonably expect on the assets they're looking to sell.
Well, you've been in the auction business for many years, and we have been friends for many years. Tell me a little bit about the auctions right now. It seems like sellers, and I know Ryle Auctions is doing a lot of work with banks right now, sellers want information and what is it called, analytics. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us how you help the sellers with their decision to auction properties.
Well, in an auction company years ago, the primary job was just to market the asset. Now the job is to market the asset and project with reasonable expectations as to what they can receive, analyze that result on the basis of their cost of carry, and then do a net present value analysis on that basis.
And how do you do that? And is it different between types of properties? Is residential different than commercial or land? How do you make a good guess? And it's got to be kind of a guess backed up with numbers on what they could possibly achieve.
Well, let's just call it an informed opinion rather than a guess.
Okay, good enough. I understand that.
Okay. What you try to do is to take all the circumstances of the asset involved, and you're absolutely right, the devil is in the detail. The analysis is based on an area where you have a dearth of commercial properties for sale, and you have an extremely low absorption into the existing residential marketplace. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be much of a demand for a commercially based retail type property if there's nobody living in the area. Mm-hmm. So then we have to project how long it's going to take to get an increase that would be noteworthy enough mm-hmm. to positively affect this asset.
Okay. Holding cost, you touched on that a little bit, and I did my normal start of the program about government surplus properties and holding costs. Tell us about what you found in dealing with banks and how you reinforce the fact and kind of inform what kind of costs they are actually having.
The financial marketplace took a long time to rediscover an old truth, mm-hmm. and that was that it costs somewhere between 22 and 32% per year for a typical financial institution to hold the average asset. Now, that's a rather significant number.
Big time number.
So, effectively, in 3 years, the entire asset value is eaten up by the cost of carry. Okay. Obviously, in some instances, that would not be so, but in others, it would be. So that's just a real significant number. It was that way 20, 30 years ago when we did this the last time.
Mm-hmm. I seem to think that based on Raul's success recently, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it seems like the banks are not holding the assets like they had been in the last, I'm going to say 3, 4, 5 years even, and now they're realizing that they really should get rid of these assets because of the cost and the management time and all that. Are you finding that to be true?
Yes, and there are two other things that are affecting dramatically the bank's actions.
Okay.
And that is somebody from the outside is informing them that it's in their best interest to do so.
Okay.
Number one, the underwriters, the people who value bank stock, may take a good long look at a financial institution and say, okay, you're holding special assets significantly more and significantly for a longer period of time than your peer group. Therefore, you need to speed that up. And the same thing said in a different way by the regulators.
And the regulators, you're talking about the FDIC?
Yes.
Okay. And so they are encouraging banks to sell these type of assets now more than they have been?
Yes. Well, they're basically wanting the balance sheet to be as clean as possible.
Okay.
There's a line item, I think it's line 11 for REO, real estate owned.
Okay.
They are not interested in seeing that, continue year after year after year to grow by virtue of a slow sales level or no sales level. It's not good for them. Mm-hmm. There's something that the banks look at called a Texas ratio. Regulators look at called the Texas ratio, and that ratio, once it gets over 100 is a pretty good indication that a bank is going to run on extremely tough times.
Okay. Let's go back in time a little bit, where the FDIC was getting these special assets when they closed a bank. In fact, I remember, because you're from Louisiana and I did some deals in Louisiana. Back then, what would happen is a bank would close. The buyer of the bank would not take the special assets, the REO, so the FDIC would be forced to sell them and hire an auction firm to do it. And the difference is also that back then, and we're talking about the last downturn 20 years ago, that the assets would be within probably 50 to 100 miles. And now it's different in a lot of ways. Give me your opinion on that.
Well, there are institutions themselves are much larger in size than they were back then.
Okay.
There has been, an increasing expansion of the big and medium-sized banks into more regional and local territories.
Okay.
So, of course, as that happens, then the assets are going to be located in a wider and wider range. So that's primarily the reason. The other thing is that the FDIC discovered that they didn't do a particularly good job of that.
Okay.
They determined that it was in their best interest to try to outsource that out with management firms and others, rather than try to do it themselves, because they had to staff up. They had to hire, hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands.
Right.
And it was easier to manage a contract with a management firm than it is manage people.
Well, very good. Listen, we're going to take a short MarkNet Alliance break, and then we'll be right back. Want to talk about government surplus properties and your take on that. And so if you hang with me for just a bit, we'll be right back.
You bet.
MarkNet Alliance is a national, membership-based network of 41 auction companies. Our companies are successful auction professionals with proven track records and thriving businesses. The MarkNet companies have a staff of over 540 employees who are working hard every day to meet the goals of their clients during our ever-changing economy. MarkNet companies are able to achieve these goals through cutting-edge technologies and ever-growing investor pools. To view the hundreds of auctions currently being conducted, or for more information, visit marknetalliance.com.
All right, we're back. You're listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I'm your host, Doug Dennison. We have on the line Jerry Day from Rowell Auctions. He's the National Sales Manager. We're talking about a lot of things. We're talking about the FDIC. We're talking about banks starting to sell their properties. And before we get on government surplus properties, we had a big auction in December for a bank. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Jerry?
Yes, we had one in December where we were selling literally hundreds of assets across the southeastern United States, and those assets were, ranging from commercial buildings to building lots.
Okay.
Residential assets.
Mm-hmm. And how many approximately, and was the bank happy, and what kind of ways did you sell the properties?
Well, we sold the property using a combination of techniques. We used a combination of a ballroom-style auction augmented with online bidding, and where the bidding on an asset did not stop until the bidders were finished bidding. In some instances, the sales went on for an additional 2.5 to 3 hours.
Wow. Okay. And how does that work? Auto extend? What does that mean?
Well, if we're in a ballroom environment, we typically have the auction open for bidding for 7 days before the on-site event takes place.
Okay.
As the auctioneer calls the sale, the assets are started where they are in the online bidding, and they cry the outcry bid. entered into the system, so there's tracking of everything that goes on for the seller. And at the end of the calling of that bid, the auction is turned back to the internet, and the high bidder is told they need to protect their bid through the internet. If they're on site, we have bid assistants there with PDAs who can enter their bids electronically. If a bid comes in within the last 10 minutes, the auction's extended again for another similar period of time.
Well, that sounds good for the buyer and the seller. Tell us about the fact that, because I saw the letter of reference from the bank, and congratulations. But in that letter of reference, they stated that one of the keys was that it was sold at absolute auction. Tell us what absolute auction means, and why does it benefit the seller and the buyer?
An absolute auction is an auction that is sold without reserve, and the reason it benefits both parties is, number one, for the seller, you're going to get higher prices because you get better participation. And from the buyer, that means that you don't waste time doing due diligence on an asset that you do not know will trade.
Okay, I remember in the reference letter that I saw that was very specific that they attributed the success of the auction on the overwhelming marketing numbers that came because of the absolute auction. And so, again, congratulations. Talked about government surplus properties. Congressman Denham's bill, H.R. 1734, has been passed in the House. This is a bill that has been really worked on by both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, the president a year ago in the State of the Union pretty well kind of started the whole ship going this way when he said there's thousands of properties that the government is not using, and we need to sell them to help balance the budget. But also we need to take them off of the books because they're costing the taxpayer. And as you know, I always bring up the post office in Washington, D.C. that hasn't been used for 10 years, and yet it costs $6 million a year to maintain. And just like your reference before, that it costs money to maintain a property even though it's not being used. So give us, again, because you've been involved in a lot of government auctions, why do you think the government should sell these properties in relationship to net present value, the good things that it will do for the local community and getting taxes and building up the area? Give us a quick brushstroke on that, please.
Well, Doug, it's very similar to a number of bases that were abandoned years ago. They were closed because there were just too many and didn't need to be staffed and that sort of thing. And everybody thought, well, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to manage that? Well, what happened in a number of instances that I'm aware is that those bases were turned into alternative uses that produced jobs in the local community. So basically, the asset was turned from not only a non-earning asset, but a cost asset, to one that produced net positive dollars for both state, local, and federal governments. That's why.
Well, and you are exactly right. What it was called, the base realignment, it was BRAC. I can't remember the initials, but closure. And what they did is they gave an opportunity for the local municipalities to utilize it. And we were in a different time back then. We weren't in such a terrible deficit problem. And so what they did actually was give it to municipalities, give it to charitable organizations. They did sell a couple of them in California, a couple bases. One sold for about $700 million, and another sold for, I think, about $350 million, which, again, should help the government help balance its books. Now I think we're in deeper trouble where we can't just give the properties to the local municipalities, although they do sometimes turn into job-paying, job-producing assets. They're still not doing much for the local areas in bringing taxes to the municipalities. So Congressman Denham is trying to say, let's sell these properties, take them off the books, and this is a great thing. And I know you've been involved in the government and the RTC and the FDIC. We're hoping that we can do a whole bunch of these properties by auction because it's the fairest and most transparent way. Tell us what Rowell Auctions is doing. Do they have any big auctions coming up?
We do have one. We have one that's out there right now that's,
okay.
I think it's about 150, 160 assets. The assets are in Georgia, Alabama, Florida. We have several more that are on the horizon, and just got off the telephone with a large financial institution that's going to have a big land tract down in Florida that we'll be working with. Doug, what you said is exactly right on it. The government, some of the government installations were given away, but some were also placed in public-private ownership. For example, I think one in Alexandria, Louisiana, where they ended in a quasi-ownership situation and turned that into one of the largest jet airliner refinishing facilities in the United States.
I did not know that, Jerry. That's very interesting. And that's Alexandria,
there's
Louisiana.
The bottom line is a non-earning asset is not as good as an earning asset. Okay, it's just that simple. It's not rocket science. So,
well, it seems to be like common sense. But what we got to do is now move it from the House, get it to the Senate. The Senate is going to be saying, okay, we like the idea kind of, but we need to tweak it, and then it goes back to the House and they arm wrestle for a while, and then it goes to the president to sign if everybody can get the heads together. And I know it's an election year, but this is important stuff for you and me and everybody that's listening as far as a taxpayer. We're running out of time. Give us the Rowell Auctions website, please.
Sure. www.rowell, R-O-W-E-L-L, auctions, auctions.com.
Jerry, thank you so much for calling in. Really appreciate it. You have a great weekend, and thank you for your expert advice about auctions. You've been in the business for many years and continue to be a great presence in the auction industry.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, you take care.
Bye.
All right, we're going to take a break at the half, and just a short one, and we'll be right back with more exciting stuff. All right, we are back. You're listening to the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I am your host, Doug Dennison. We just had Jerry Day from Rowell Auctions, the national sales manager, on the phone. We're talking about surplus properties that the government has, up to 14,000 properties. Estimates from congressmen and senators talk about $15 billion worth. And this is pretty important, I would say, since we are having a little budget deficit problem, are we not? And so we are pushing it. I'm encouraging it. I'm hoping that auctions, because this is obviously an auction show, and I've done probably 6,000 properties of government properties by auction. And because it is the fairest and most transparent way to sell an asset, and especially when you're in the government. How do you deal with bids that come in that are offers, and one says, I'll give you $10 million for this, but I need a due diligence period of 6 months to do my homework on it, or another one says, well, I can give you $11 million, but I need financing, or another offer says, I'll give you $9 million, but I don't need any due diligence time. I will make the offer and close in 30 days. Hey, we got a new caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hi, Doug. Bob Pliska.
Bob Pliska. Hey, thanks so much for calling. Tell us where you're from and what company you represent.
I'm from Sperry Van Ness, from the Michigan offices of Sperry Van Ness. And Sperry Van Ness is a commercial real estate firm. We buy, sell, lease, finance commercial properties. And I primarily concentrate on the Detroit and the Michigan market.
Tell us about Sperry Van Ness on a nationwide basis. How many agents, how many offices, that kind of good stuff.
Sperry is we have approximately about 1,000 agents across the country. We represent 150 markets across the country. So if you need a property in Boise, Idaho, we have somebody there. So it's a fairly large firm. We're pretty much connected. We do weekly meetings through our conference calls and so forth, and we also have annual meetings that we attend and meet each other personally. So when something comes up on a specific basis, such as auctions, which we were able to do here in the state of Michigan with Sperry Van Ness, I didn't have at the time substantial auction experience, so I called up our auction team, and they were able to accomplish a $31.5 million auction.
Well, I worked on that sale with you and was very pleased to number one, meet you and find out how professional you were. Tell us a little bit about that property and again, who it was for, why there was an auction, and I also want to get to those holding costs.
Yes, this particular property was a property that was owned by the state of Michigan. It was 414 acres in the western suburbs of Detroit, and the state of Michigan tried unsuccessfully 4 times to dispose of the property by the normal means, putting it on the market and who would come and potentially buy it, etc. And for whatever reason, that never worked. What this was again, 414 acres, where a hospital in which the state was involved with, because it was a psychiatric hospital, closed down because there were other means and methods that they were using in order to accomplish the objectives that were needed for that specific hospital. So as a result, the state wanted to eliminate that property because it was costing them over $500,000 a year in operating costs in order to maintain it, security costs, and so it was one way that they could eliminate that property. And being in a fairly decent market in the sense of a western suburb of Detroit, which was pretty much of a middle-class upscale suburb, it was an opportunity to not only achieve getting rid of $500,000 costs per year, but it was also an opportunity to get substantial money from a private developer. And through the auction process, we were able to sell that property for $31.5 million.
Well, people are knowledgeable, I think, more about like house auctions, and I'm talking on a general basis. And when they think of commercial auctions, they don't see as many as 100 houses here and 300 houses here. Part of a good commercial auction is to make sure that the potential buyers have enough information that they can bid on the property because due diligence in an auction happens before the auction compared to in transactional brokerage and conventional brokerage. Many times you'll have an offer, but the offer will be contingent on a pick a number, 60-day due diligence period, and so auctions are different. Tell us about the difficulty of, or the immense problems that asset had, in what we had to do to make sure that potential buyers knew what they were getting into.
Well, you just kind of highlighted one of the benefits of an auction, because when you do have an auction, you can go from start to finish in 90 days, and because of that, one of the requirements in order to do that, all the due diligence has to be done up front and provided to the potential buyer. And this specific property, for example, had substantial issues in the sense of underground tunnels there was like I think 20 buildings on the property, going from one building to another. It had environmental issues. It had an actual oil well on the property. It had a police shooting range that was adjacent to the state police shooting range on the adjacent to the property. So it was something that you had to look at in the sense of both the environmental issues, the various building issues that the property had,
right,
and how to address those.
Didn't it have some asbestos
and there was
issues?
Asbestos in some of the buildings that had to be determined as how to get rid of those, that and what requirements and costs that it would take. So as a result, in doing the due diligence package, which any prospective buyer that came along, it was a fairly extensive package in the sense of what had been done on the property before, in the sense of analysis of environmental issues, problems that the property had, surveys, titles, and so that package, if you probably stacked it up in paper-wise, was probably several inches thick.
Oh, it was several inches. I think, if I remember correctly, looking at it, it was with all the information and the legal and the environmental and structural. Gosh, I'm thinking it was like 5, 6, maybe 7 inches tall. And
it's huge.
Yes,
and
yes.
Unfortunately, with the computers nowadays, we can put a lot of that into like one CD, where you don't have to transport that like we used to do
Yes.
in the mails, where it would cost us a fortune. But with you can put most of that on like 1 or 2 CDs.
And it's a wonderful thing, and emailing people that. And it's interesting because when a buying entity is looking at a $30 million transaction, like the one at the State Psychiatric Hospital for the state of Michigan, now what you can do is you can send it, and the entity can say, okay, I'm going to take legal out, and I'm sending it to our attorneys, and I'm going to take out environmental, and I'm going to send it there, and I'm going to talk about comparables and send it to my property asset management team. And so it's much, much easier than it was in the days past. And that was back when? Was that 2007? I can't remember it. 2006?
2006 and 7 in that area.
2006 and 7 in that area. Very, very good. Tell us what the Detroit market is doing, please.
Well, the plus is the Detroit market has substantially turned around in the sense of not only the Detroit area, but the state of Michigan. And a lot of things are happening. As you know, the auto companies back in 2008 and 9 were, some of them, GM and Chrysler, did file bankruptcy, and Ford continued forward. But since then, because of the things that have occurred and the substantial turnaround in the economy, the auto companies like GM just posted one of the largest sales it has ever had, in the sense of $7.6 billion for the year. And as a result, most of the that provides the whole Detroit and Michigan area, even
Yep.
though autos isn't our only source of revenue. It is one of the key areas because we do have alternative energy, which is somewhat auto-related, and technology, which has been going very well. In fact, just looking at some of the surveys that have been coming out, I just kind of jotted them down here to mention them. We were rated like number one in job creation potential for the state of Michigan, number one in tech job growth, number one in small business loans that are being done, number two in economic health, number one in vehicle-related R&D, and then even our tax structure has gone with our new governor, who is a CPA venture capitalist background,
Wow.
has taken the tax system, and we went from number 47 in tax climate to number 7 in tax climate. So any industry that would be coming in would be a big plus because they're able to deal with all this activity, potential jobs, and a tax system that is very workable to anybody coming in.
Well, that is quite a turnaround from a few years ago. So congratulations. So it sounds like it's business friendly, and so if I'm a business that is thinking about moving into the Detroit area, I'm going to need to buy a piece of land. I'm going to need to buy commercial buildings. Who could I possibly contact to get that done?
Well, obviously, that's what we are here for. I'll be happy to work with anybody in coming into Michigan, or we do have. I can refer them to sources like the economic development
Right.
groups at the state of Michigan, at the county that they would like to move into, like Oakland County here, which I am in, is one of the has a tremendous system in order to take a potential company and lead it through what it has to be, what to do in order to get the best bang for their buck in moving here.
Well, how do people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me through my phone is 248-433-1400. My email is robert.pliska, Pliska, at svn, Sally Victor Nancy, svn.com. Or they can also follow me on my Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts, and the handle there is rpliska, rpliska.
Well, thank you so much for calling in. I'm really happy that you touched on the fact that the state psychiatric hospital was sold for $31.5 million, but it saved the state of Michigan $500,000 a year. And I know I've kept you up to date with H.R. 1734, which is Congressman Denham's bill that has been passed by the House. And what they're trying to do is sell and reutilize properties that the government is not using. And again, I'll say it again, the one that really kills me is the post office in Washington, D.C. that cost the government, which the government is you and I, $6 million a year to maintain, and yet it hasn't been used for 10 years. So these are the kind of things that the federal government is dealing with, and we need to sell these things, and just like you did with the state of Michigan, you helped them sell it, gave $31.5 million to the budget, and saved them $500,000 in basically taxpayer cost for an unused property. You agree that 14,000 properties would be a good idea to try to help balance the budget and take the load off us taxpayers?
Yes, that sure would. And again, as a result, as you indicated, this property was costing the state $500,000 per year. In addition, going back to that Northfield property, since then there has been announced the University of Michigan will be putting a medical office building on that property of over 100,000 square feet, which creates jobs in not only building that particular hospital, but also the economic impact and plus that is going to have for the community. So we can take those 14,000 properties and have possibly private developers convert them into a useful property, and that would generate funds and good things for their communities.
Well, you take a non-tax-paying property, and now you give it to private business who, just like you said, are going to provide jobs. They're going to pay the municipalities taxes. And the other thing we haven't talked about is if you have an unused building, what normally happens is that it's not maintained well, and that I'm not going to say blight in the area, but it's certainly not an attractive property, and everybody goes by it, and it's, oh, that's that property that's closed down. Doesn't this affect the neighbors? Doesn't that affect the marketability for the neighbors?
Yes, definitely. Here, this particular property, the Northfield property, was and has been over the years impacting probably the values of all those properties surrounding it, because here you had over 20 buildings that were just falling apart, that were being, broken into, and also a security issue and a risk issue to the state who owned the property.
Liability.
For insurance purposes,
Sure.
a liability issue.
Sure.
And so it's definitely a way in order to convert some of these properties that are just a major problem to the government to eliminate them, and also add to the values of the area, since maybe a better property will be built on it.
And the neighbors gotta like that when now my property as a neighbor is enhanced because there's somebody new building there, creating jobs, creating activity. My business next door has got to increase in value, has got to get new business, and so it's a wonderful thing. Hey, Bob, thank you so much. Give us your telephone number again. Again, this is Bob Pliska from Sprague Van Ness in the Detroit, Michigan area.
The telephone number is 248-433-1400. Email is robert.pliska@svn.com, and my social media handles are rpliska, R-P-L-I-S-K-A.
Very good. Hey, thank you so much, Bob, for calling in, and I look forward to having you on the show at another time. You're always a great source of information from the Detroit market, but also in government surplus properties. One last question. I know it cost $500,000 for the state, but how long was that property vacant?
I think when they closed down the hospital, it was vacant for like at least 3 or 4 years, and then they tried to sell it through the normal means versus an auction, and they failed 4 times on that. So you had probably 3 or 4 years of the state having to pay for the carrying costs.
So 4 times $500,000 is $2 million, and
right.
And now
right.
you get our gist on what these properties are costing taxpayers. Bob, thank you so much. You have a great weekend.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. Bye-bye
Bye.
now. We have a next caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug. How are you?
Well, good. Is this Allison?
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, and we've had an exciting show. We've got a broker from Detroit that called in, talked about the auction of a property in Michigan for the state of Michigan that brought in $31 million to the state budget, but also took off $500,000 a year of maintenance cost. And so that's what we're talking about all day on this government surplus properties and how important it is. But I need to know, what is Rowell Auction up to in regards to upcoming auctions?
Well, we're definitely quite busy coming up.
Good.
This coming Tuesday, March 6th, we have about 150 so assets in North Georgia, South Georgia, North Florida, South Florida, and Alabama.
Are these bank properties?
Yes, they are.
Cool.
The majority of them are running absolute.
Absolute, which means no matter what they sell. Was that correct?
Correct.
Wow. So your phones must be ringing off the hook.
Yes.
And I know the web page has been getting a lot of views, and because of the marketing that Rowell Auctions does, these absolute auctions are doing very, very well, not only for the seller, but for the buyer, because they know that it's going to be sold, and they're not wasting their time. So, congratulations on that. What other auctions are coming up?
We have an art collection auction coming up March 6th through the 13th.
Okay.
We have a house in Clayton County, Georgia,
Okay.
March the 8th. We have 7 assets in Georgia, March the 8th also. And we have some real estate and some personal property, March the 9th.
Very good. How do people access all this information? Because there's got to be a whole bunch of information. Just the first auction that you mentioned is going to be in 3 or 4 different states, and it's going to be all absolute and or mostly absolute, and probably different types of properties. How do they access the information?
Our website,
Okay.
which is RowellAuctions.com.
Okay. Now, can you bid online for these properties?
Yes.
Okay. So, how do you do that? How do people that have never bid online before go to our website and figure out what to do?
Our website is super user-friendly. We actually have videos that you can watch that helps you to register
Nice.
and also shows you how to bid.
Okay.
And then we also have a quick links up at the upper right-hand corner on our homepage
All right.
that'll access you to create your account and also access to the videos.
Very, very nice. And you also have a 800 number that if they get in a pinch, they can call you, Allison. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is that telephone number?
It is 800-323-8388.
Do it one more time for me.
800-323-8388.
Okay, so I counted more than 200 properties coming up on RowellAuctions.com. Allison, thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate it. You do a fantastic job for the company, and always pleasant to talk to. You have a wonderful weekend, and again, thank you so much for calling in today.
Thank you, and you too.
Take care, Allison.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we are back. We're in the final stretch here. A couple more minutes. Listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. You've just heard from Allison from Rowell Auctions. They've got more than 200 properties coming up being sold at auction. Most of it absolute. Absolute means it sells no matter what. That is a good thing. If you're a buyer, you know that it's going to sell. You're not going to waste your time. And you want to go on RowellAuctions.com. I talked briefly with you in the beginning of the show that I was going to tell you how real estate professionals are calling auction companies and saying, how can we work together to make money? Well, number one way is to register a buyer for an auction. If you go on the website for Rowell Auctions and these upcoming auctions, you'll see that they're encouraging broker participation to bring a buyer. That's good for the buyer, it's good for the broker, it's good for the seller, it's good for the auction company, and they get a piece of the pie by registering the buyer. Another way to make money if you're a broker is by auction referrals. Let's say you've got a client and the client says, I really need to sell quickly, and What about an auction? Well, give us a call, and we can help you out. You can stay involved, and that's a wonderful thing. And we will pay you for that. The third way is, what if we have an auction coming up and we need somebody that's a local broker that can help us for a local auction headquarters? You can help us. Again, we will call you, contact you, you tell us if you're interested, and you become the local auction site. You help us with previews and really help with the auction a great deal. And the last way is buy at auction. You know the prices, so buy at auction. So those are the 4 tips. I appreciate you listening. This is Doug Dennison. You are listening to WFOY 1240 AM. Thank you again, and have a pleasant weekend with your family.